Lesson 6, Federalism and Principles of American Democracy. Federalism is defined as the sharing of power and responsibility between different levels of government. Sharing power and responsibility between different levels of government. Federalism is much different from separation of powers, and oftentimes students confuse the two concepts. Think of federalism as being horizontal, top to bottom. At the top of our system is the national government, often called our federal government. Below that, you have 50 state governments in the United States. And then at the bottom level are over 80,000 local governments in our country called counties and municipalities. On the other hand, separation of powers is vertical. You have 3 branches of government, each with separate, distinct powers and responsibilities separate from each other, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Federalism is horizontal. Separation of powers is vertical. In our federal system, the highest level of government at the top is the national government, which makes laws for the entire country. Washington, D.C., of course, is the home of our national government, what we also call our federal government. In fact, these two terms in our system, national government and federal government, can be used interchangeably. Do not get confused when I or others, in one instance, calls our national government the federal government, and in another instance, calls our federal government the national government. These are synonymous terms in our system. Our country also has 50 state governments that make laws for the citizens of their states. And then at the lowest level are the over 80,000 local governments in the U.S., again, in the form of counties and municipalities. The focus of this particular course will be on the federal government, but we will also study our state and local governments as well. These 3 levels of government share powers and responsibilities. Powers given specifically to the national government are called delegated powers. We will have a unit later in the semester and a special lesson just on the delegated powers of the national government. But for now, just some examples of delegated powers would be the power to coin money or make money, the power to raise an army, the power to issue copyrights and patents. These are delegated to the national government, specific to the national government, exclusive to the national government. State and locals do not have this authority. Powers given specifically to the state and local governments are called reserve powers. Again, we'll have a lesson on the reserve powers of our state and local governments. Examples for this purpose would be to run schools, power to establish licensure requirements for professionals, power to run elections. Examples of reserve powers of the state and local governments. Powers that all levels of governments share, these powers are called concurrent powers. In other words, state, federal, and local governments all can tax, all can enforce laws, and all establish courts. So these types of powers would be called concurrent powers. Each level of government shares this powers with the others. State and local governments cannot take actions or pass laws that go against the laws and authority of the national government. This is called national supremacy. That's in Article 6 of our Constitution, and we will have a later lesson on that article. Democratic government. The United States is a democracy, a government in which we, the people, rule. Abraham Lincoln, in his very famous Gettysburg Address, described our democracy as, quote, a government of the people, for the people, by the people. The word democracy is a Greek word, or is derived from a Greek word, demoskrasi, rule by the people. The ancient Greeks of Athens were the first to institute democracy. Cleisthenes made the Assembly of Athens the governing authority of the city-state. Not all Greek city-states were democracies. Athens was, and Cleisthenes initiated democracy in Athens. Athens had a direct democracy, meaning if you were a citizen of Athens, you had the authority to meet in the assembly, debate matters of public policy, propose laws, vote on laws. You were a citizen legislator. This was definitely what we call participatory democracy. We do not, repeat, we do not have a direct democracy in the United States. We have a representative democracy. Large populations make direct democracy impractical for most countries. So what we do, we choose a smaller group of citizens to represent us and to govern for us on our behalf. So that's why our democracy is called a representative democracy or an indirect democracy. A representative democracy is an indirect democracy since the people do not govern themselves firsthand, like they did in ancient Athens. We elect representatives to do that for us. Another term for a representative democracy is a republic. The Romans had the first republic in history. The Roman Republic was established in 509 BC. The Romans had a Senate and other legislative assemblies. The Roman Republic ended with the crowning of Augustus Caesar in 27 BC as Rome's first emperor, thus beginning the Roman Empire. Emperors now govern Rome, not the Senate. Since our country has a representative democracy, we are also said to be a republic. Think of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our flag stands for our republic, our government of elected officials. And when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, all we are doing is pledging our loyalty to our government of elected officials, which we can choose, which we can replace at any election time. Our elected representatives write our laws, they make our public policy. We don't do that ourselves firsthand, and we conduct elections to choose who will do that for us. Another very important principle in understanding our democracy is the concept of popular sovereignty. Popular, the people, sovereignty, the authority to govern. Popular sovereignty, the people have the power, not the elected governing officials. The elected officials are empowered by the people. Another way of looking at it is the people are the source of the government's power. The first words of our Constitution, we the people of the United States. In fact, those words were written much larger than the rest of the text, slanted in a different direction to really highlight the fact that the people have the power in our democracy. So the phrase, we the people, embodies the principle of popular sovereignty. In another one of our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote that our government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. Specifically, governments get its authority from the consent of the governed. So that phrase also embodies that principle of popular sovereignty. The people are the source of the government's power. Popular sovereignty. We debate different ideas and different courses for public policy. When differences of opinion arise, we agree to abide by what most people want. This is the concept of majority rule. However, we must always remember to respect the rights of the minority. Many have argued that the First Amendment to our Constitution was written to protect minority rights. More on the First Amendment and our rights later, the rights of the minority. Democracies have free and open elections to choose their elected officials. Everyone's vote carries the same weight. All candidates have the right to express their views freely. Legal requirements for voting are kept to a minimum. And citizens may vote freely by secret ballot without fear of punishment. So if we were to sum up the principles of American democracy, we would say, certainly rule of law. All people, including those who govern, are bound by law. No one is above the law. In fact, it was Sam Adams who said, "We are a nation of laws, not men." Rule of law applies to all. Limited government. Government is not all-powerful. It may only do those things that people have given it the power to do. And again, government gets its authority from the consent of the governed, from we, the people, popular sovereignty. Consent of the governed, all American citizens are the source of government power. Individual rights. In the American democracy, individual rights are protected by government. We referenced that in an earlier lesson, and we will be studying in greater detail the rights you have as U.S. citizens embodied in our Constitution. And lastly, representative government. People elect government leaders to make the laws and govern on their behalf. Representative democracy, not direct, representative. We, the people, have the authority. We elect who we want to represent us, to make laws and government policy on our behalf. And if we do not like what they are doing in office, we are certainly free to elect different government leaders, different representatives, different elected officials to make our laws and govern on our behalf. This concludes Lesson 6, Federalism and Principles of American Democracy.